Good morning, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Friday at the Fun House. No, we're not at the Fart House like I incorrectly mentioned yesterday. Martin's probably wondering, what the hell are you talking about, Pete? Good morning, Martin. What's happening?
I missed that.
Yeah, I was talking really quickly. I was promoting this show, and I was talking really fast, and I kind of said Friday morning at the Fun House, or Fart House instead of Fun House. I'm like, no, wait, that doesn't make any sense. So yeah, some people are like, great, I can't wait to go to the Fart House. I'm like, yeah, well. Anyway, us guys, right? We can laugh.
It's going to be a better show than our show.
Probably, because for us guys, farts are always funny, and that's just the way it is. My wife is always like, I can't believe how funny you think fart jokes are. I'm like, I'm a guy, it's what we do. Fart and shit jokes are hilarious, but I don't. So anyway, get our heads out of the gutter here. So it is Friday morning. We've got a fun topic here for you today, which will actually be another part two. Gee, no surprise there. We're going to talk about hired guns. So these are these musicians who kind of have popped up everywhere, and yet never really seem to stay anywhere for too long. But very, in most cases, these musicians we're going to talk about, who they are. They're amazing players. Maybe the reason why some of them are not more well known is because they don't stay anywhere long enough, right? So we're going to talk about the two parts here. We're each going to take in each one of these parts a different instrument. So Martin's going to tackle some drummers. I'm going to tackle some guitar players, and then we're going to switch gears in the next episode. We're going to take either singers or bass players or keyboard players or whatever. We haven't decided yet. So I'll have Martin kick us off with his number 5 guy, drummer.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Pete. So let's go with Simon Phillips to start with. Mike Rutherford, Small Creeps Day. I'm going to leave that one for last. One of my favorite albums of all time. Pete Townsend, All the Best Cowboys Have Chinese Eyes. And, these have the credits aren't very good on these two, White City and All the Best Cowboys. But, there are other players on it, and Mark Brez, whatever, how you pronounce it, from Big Country, great drummer. I remember when all this stuff came out, he was always into the drum magazines and stuff, right?
Yeah, he was.
But I do know for a fact that it is Simon on Give Blood. And Give Blood is an amazing, Simon Phillips drum performance. And then I'll just leave the last two to talk about the most here. And this is also a very key one for him. This is Michael Shinker Group, produced by Roger Glover, but Simon is a big part of this. But I think the two most important ones, and just to talk a little bit about Simon. So Simon was a little bit of a kid prodigy or whatever. So he came in, and I wanted to pick him because he is the drummer on this Judas Priest album, Sin After Sin. And he performed an early version of a Scott Travis for that band, like actually, inspiring them to go new places. John Hinch was the drummer on the previous album. I think it's John Hinch, Alan Moore. I keep getting them mixed up all the time. But anyways, so he comes in and actually, raises their creativity level. And they wanted him to stay in the band, but he had other commitments because he is a hired gun, right? He's kind of going all over the place, but he's just more or less starting his career at this point. For his style, I think one of the interesting things about his style, he has a very good circular motion, but he's also the kind of guy that for the tom fills, he'll start them sort of early, and then it'll just be kind of thing, right? And very like highly tuned toms and stuff. And of course he has a jazzy style because he's been into all sorts of interesting situations there. Mike Oldfield, just mentioned a few other names: Joe Satriani, Jack Bruce, 801, Gary Moore, Derek Sherinian. He's on a bunch of Derek's albums. But Give Blood is a perfect performance to show exactly what he's like as his dissident aggressor on Sin After Sin. But this is also one of my favorite albums of all time. And on this one, the credits are much clearer because they have these cool little symbols to show who's drumming on each one. And that rounded wine glass is Simon. And he's on 6 of 10 tracks on this album. And I can hear them in my head. I Am an Animal, And I Moved, Let My Love Open the Door. Great drum performances, right? Very, very dancey and bubbly and lilting sort of a drummer. Cats in the Cupboard and Empty Glass and Gonna Get You. So there's a good clue to Simon's thing. But in my general more so leaning. I'm a lot more limited than Pete is, but my leaning towards hard rock mode. It's really like I love what he did on Michael Shinker Group debut and Sin After Sin. But it's pretty cool seeing him in this too. And he was the drummer for the Who on the '89 reunion tour. And he joined Toto. He's on a bunch of Toto albums after Jeff Porcaro died, right? But there you go. Simon Phillips, great guy. Interviewed him once for my old Judas Priest book. He was really, really nice dude. And obviously, yeah, he's been all over the place. And like I say, I love that he actually probably spurs extra creativity out of his bandmates.
Yeah. Fascinating guy. I interviewed him earlier this year or late last year. I don't remember exactly when.
That's right. Yeah, very recently. Yeah.
Yeah, and and he's done a lot of great jazzy stuff and fusion. He's just a really well-rounded player. He should be like a household name, and he is among musicians and people who follow this sort of thing. But fantastic drummer who could fit into any style, and I think that's what made him such a wanted guy, right? To fit into any project. So that's a great choice. My first guy here today is going to be Doug Aldridge. So of course, Doug has made the rounds in recent years. He's a more recent guy. Kind of got his start in, what was, his band Lion, who were a pretty terrific group that I think just kind of came out a little bit too late. They're kind of, they're very 80s sounding, kind of hair metal-y, kind of, along the lines of that, like kind of Blue Murder sort of thing, which there's the John Sykes connection, which we'll get to in a minute. But they never really took off at all. And, he showed up everywhere else afterwards. I mean, he made his way into Dio's band, which I think is when he first really started to get noticed, right? That didn't last too long. And then, Coverdale heard about him. And here's where it gets interesting, because I think David Coverdale has long been wanting to kind of replicate the John Sykes factor in Whitesnake. And I think, when he saw Doug in Dio's band, I think he was like, I have to have that guy, because he plays a Les Paul, he's got the big blonde hair, he's got their styles are somewhat similar. So of course he played on two Whitesnake studio albums, of which Forevermore was the final one. This was probably the bigger of the two, and he's got that style, the big muscular riffing. Okay, again, with the double humbuckers on the Les Paul, he's a great soloist, and he's got that it factor, so to speak. And but unfortunately, Doug doesn't stick around anywhere for too long. So he spent his time in Whitesnake. He was like the what does David call like his right hand? Red Beach is now that person, but his musical conductor or his right hand man. I don't know. He's got a term for it. But so he moves on from Whitesnake.
Music director.
That's it.
Director, musical director.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, you got it. Yep. Then he goes and he the Dead Daisies, right? Which is another kind of revolving cast, kind of super group. And Glenn Hughes is now in the Dead Daisies. We got John Corabi, all sorts of folks have been in this band, which is kind of like it's a little bit different than Whitesnake and Dio. This is more of like a really good bluesy hard rock band, although even heavier on this new album with Glenn Hughes. He's done the Frontiers Projects things. He's Burning Rain, Revolution Saints is another thing. Bad Moon Rising. He appeared on a House of Lords album. So he has, like, in maybe a shorter span of time, you talk about Simon Phillips, who's been doing this for many, many decades. Doug has been very, very active over the last 2 decades. Specifically, and is probably, out of all the guys that I picked, he is probably the best definition of hired gun in more recent times. And I'm sure if we were to fast forward 5 years and do this exercise again, Doug will have appeared on another 10 albums by then at least. So so he's my first pick of the day. Back to you, Martin.
I lost you there for a bit. Your internet's been a little jumpy, eh?
Yeah, I see that. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah. So let me know if I get jumpy on this as well, but I'm jumpy anyways. So anyways, my second one, Simon Wright. So I hope I didn't say Simon Wright when I meant Simon Phillips before, and I hope I don't say Simon Phillips now, but Simon Wright, interesting situation. He came out on through A to Z, which was one of these weird new wave of British heavy metal bands that put out kind of a really crappy live album with a really satanic cover to start with, but then they had some really nice poppy singles. So yeah, a weird way to sort of come up in the world. But he, of course, I would say the most famous thing he's been on is Fly on the Wall, plus Blow Up Your Video. And I don't think he distinguishes himself all that much on those. AC/DC want a certain thing, and they kind of get that certain thing. I guess his biggest band has been Dio, right? Getting on these records. And again, I don't, well, the one I like the most, interestingly enough, was the one that you just talked about with Doug, Killing the Dragon. It's the most up-tempo and fastest one, but Magica as well, right? But again, I don't think he really distinguishes himself there. And if you listen to a bunch of Simon Wright albums, you might not even, other than the live stuff that he's on, you might not even know how great a drummer he is, because he's meant to tap it back. But he is on what I almost think is a top 5 UFO album of all time, and it's not a UFO album. It's Mogwai Chocolate Box. That thing is blistering. Jeff Coleman is a genius, and he turns that into a UFO album, and I swear it's way better than Walk on Water, and I would put it in my top 5 UFO albums. And Simon is the drummer on that album, and he does an amazing job. It's like he doesn't sound anything like the Simon you hear on Slow Dio or Slow AC/DC, right? He's just he just rises to Jeff Coleman levels, and those guys just turn in just a blazing performance on these amazingly written songs. Just a masterpiece, that record, start to finish. Way better than Edge of the World. Like, it doesn't even sound like the same band, but it isn't, right? It's just this weird Mogwai thing. We don't have the UFO name, blah blah blah, right? Pete's in there and Phil's in there, but yeah, Jeff Coleman, what a genius, right? But that's where, swear to God, I think that's where you hear the greatest Simon Wright performance of all time. What else? Rhino Bucket, Tim Owens, Play My Game, John Norum, Worlds Away. Let's see, there's all the Dio stuff. Jeff Tate's Queensryche. This is actually another place where you get to hear.
I forgot he was on that. Yeah.
Of Simon. Yeah. So Frequency Unknown, Jeff Tate's Queensryche, and then Operation Mindcrime, The Key, Resurrection, The New Reality. All really cool albums. I mean, Jeff Tate, for all the abuse he gets for his, quote unquote personality, right? He's a pretty creative dude, and you can tell he has deep, intense creative things he wants to do, and Simon's been part of that whole thing. So I think that music's pretty underrated, what he's been doing there. Obviously way different than he got a lot of crap for the Jeff Tate solo album, but now that he's kind of heavy and proggy and stuff again to compete with the other Queensryche, ostensibly, right, or so to speak. But yeah, Simon's part of that. But yeah, if I want to say anything, check out Chocolate Box. Chocolate Box is just unbelievable. What a great record.
Yeah. The long lost, unsung, not UFO album, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, good choice. All right, my next guy, we actually talked a little bit about this dude on the Hudson Valley Squares this past week, Tommy Bohlen. I still can't believe he died. He was 25 years old, and you look at everything that he was involved with for those couple of years, just kind of crazy. So yeah, but Tommy's big, I guess, first claim to fame, whether you call it fame or not, is he appeared on the Billy Cobham album Spectrum, which is obviously a jazz fusion album, and his playing on there is absolutely extraordinary. I think he performs on 3 or 4 tracks, and just some amazing soloing on all instrumental material. He kind of did the same sort of thing on Alphonse Mouzon's Mind Transplant not long after. He also appeared because he was in the studio next door when Moxie were doing their debut album, and the lead guitar player was kind of MIA. So they're like, "Hey, Tommy, you want to come play some guitar solos?" So he shows up here. Great stuff on here. Then, Joe Walsh leaves the James Gang. They get another guitar player to join for an album. That doesn't really work. So they eventually find Tommy. I know most people seem to think that Tommy replaced Joe in James Gang. That actually wasn't the case. And he's on the Miami album and the follow-up album after that, which is Bang. Both really good albums, I think, and I think these stack up really well to the Joe Walsh era. And kind of what you get, especially on these albums, is you can kind of hear that funk thing that Tommy's got going on. He was a serious rock guitar player. He could do the jazz fusion thing because his solo albums kind of hint at that. The Muzan and Cobham's albums that I just talked about showed that he could play that. But when it came down to it, he had a really soulful style and a lot of funk in his playing. Obviously, he brought that into Deep Purple for Come Taste the Band, right? Other things, he appeared on, he was in a band Zephyr before all of this. I should have mentioned that first guy. What else has he shown up on? He's just all over the place in that brief span of time. So we're looking at the first Zephyr album was 1969, and his final solo album, Private Eyes, was 1976. So we're looking at 7 years. So he, as a teen, he was busy, getting involved in all this stuff. I mean, the first James Gang album, Bang, was 73. So really young, died way too soon, obviously, big time drug addict and had his fair share of problems. But you have to wonder, based on this, had he lived, what the next few years would have been for him. Would he have latched on and, to another band? Would he have created his own band, or would he continue to kind of do this kind of, I'll plug in anywhere and everywhere, whoever's got the paycheck, right? I don't know, but he's left behind a pretty cool legacy. And at the time, he was a true hired gun.
Did you say he was 25 when he died?
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Yes.
It's crazy.
He got a lot done. Yeah. He was on a lot of records.
Yeah, he was born August 1st, 1951, died December 4th, 1976. Wow. It's crazy, right? I think I always assumed he was older. No, didn't even make it to that number 27, right?
Yeah, and he had those 2 solo albums too, right? I guess he's on Made in Europe, right? He would be on Made in Europe.
No, he's on the Made in, the Last Concert in Japan album. He's on Made in Europe is Blackmore.
Oh, really? So Made in Europe, but it came out after Come Taste the Band, right? I think
Made in Europe came out right before Come Taste the Band. Yeah, they released that shortly after the tour. Yeah, the live album. Last Concert in Japan is the live album that he appeared on with Purple. That was the concert where he was pretty compromised. He had the problem with his, I believe it was his picking hand due to all the drugs and everything like that. He had like some sort of atrophy or whatever in his eye. I don't know all the terminology. So if you listen, and my always issue with him and Deep Purple is, and it's kind of similar to the Coverdale Hughes thing. Those two guys, I never liked hearing them sing Mark II era stuff. And for Tommy, I never liked hearing him trying to play Blackmore's licks. And I always found, when you listen to, I have a bunch of live recordings from the Come Taste the Band tour. And when he's playing the Come Taste the Band songs, they're terrific. When he's trying to mimic Blackmore's solos and riffs, it's not even that and I get trying to, because like Steve Morse in nowadays, he will give a similar feel to the Blackmore solos, but he will inject his own sort of thing. And I think that Tommy tried to replicate the Blackmore solos, and he's not that kind of player, and it just doesn't come off well. Instead of really putting his own spirit, his own signature on the solos, I think he tried to do it the Blackmore way, and it just didn't sound right. It didn't sound natural. It didn't sound like he was comfortable with it. So for me, when I listen to those old recordings and I hear them doing, the Mark II stuff, or even, the couple songs from Burn or Stormbringer, it's just oof, but then when Tommy comes to life when they're playing the newer tracks from that album. So I don't know.
Yeah, and you're right. Steve Morse does get some heck for that, or he certainly did early on, right? The being kind of casual and playful with it. He's kind of like the Vince Neil of the guitar on some of those songs. Smoke on the Water, I always think about. I remember versions of that where people are getting ticked off, right? So
I know, but some of them he does, like the Highway Star, he plays pretty much note for note. And there were a few others, but I remember because I've seen them many times with Steve, and the first couple tours, I was like, oh, he's putting his own spin on that. Steve, he's got this kind of twangy, just the Steve Morseism, because nobody sounds like him. And a lot of people are like, oh, that's not the way that song's supposed to sound. I'm like, well, he's not the same guitar player as Richie.
Well, and the riffs too. Sometimes it's almost like he's just bored and he needs to entertain himself a little bit, right?
Yeah, he would never admit that, but yes.
Funny, yeah. All right, my next choice, I'm going with Jason Bonham. You know, some horrific things to begin with. Air Race and Virginia Wolf. You know, if you're a British band, you never want to try hair metal, right? Never works out. But actually, so he has sort of a consortium going eventually, which is a great hair metal band, Bonham. Disregard of Timekeeping and Mad Hatter, two amazing records, really good records. You know, mixing a little bit of it.
That cover of that is great. That last one.
Oh yeah,
up again. That is awesome.
Mad Hatter.
Yeah, I always love that cover. That's wild. Very cool.
Yeah, pretty cool. And yeah, I mean, they were a cut above, and they were kind of artistic. They had a Zeppelin quality to it. Daniel McMaster, right? Is that yes, Daniel. Yes, he was from I think Hamilton, Ontario, just down the highway from me here, and he died sadly quite a while ago, the lead singer. But these guys were a great band. And then a very unsung album is this record. I loved this record to death when it came out. When You See the Sun, the Jason Bonham Band, right? I wish you would have just called it Bonham. We'd have another Bonham album, right? But also one of the most amazing things I've ever seen is I haven't seen it for a while, so I hope I'm describing this right, but they do an in-studio jam of some UFO songs on this. He was in UFO briefly for this, and I think it's You Are Here. And this is just a stunning performance. I saw a drum clinic with him in a small place here years and years ago. Actually, it was around the Jason Bonham Band album. Sorry, I got that mixed up. This is When You See the Sun. An amazing studio album of originals. This is just one of those stupid Led Zeppelin covers things. The same band did. So this is Jason Bonham Band, Zeppelin covers, who cares? And this is Jason Bonham Band, absolute masterpiece, When You See the Sun. And then, of course, some of the greatest drum performances of all time are across the Black Country Communion albums. And I've said this and got in trouble a lot of times, but when you have that argument about, is Richie Blackmore the greatest guitarist of all time, or is Neil Peart the greatest drummer of all time, or John Bonham? And then you have these young guys who can do all that, and then then people come out and say, the old guys come out and say, oh yeah, but the young guys don't have the feel, or whatever, right? All bull. You know, you can have feel, right? It's like, oh, you know, to think Mike Portnoy can't drum like Ringo Starr if you asked him to. Completely wrong. He totally could. Right. It literally would take him about 3.2 seconds to sort that out in his head. Okay, you want Ringo? Here's Ringo. And, you know, and Paul McCartney would probably be sitting there going, wow, that was great, Mike. That was amazing, right? That's the point, right? And so I've run into trouble lots of times when I've been in an argumentative mood and said things like, Jason Bonham is twice the drummer his dad ever was. And I kind of almost believe that, because he seems to have everything his dad could do. And he's just as creative. Plus, he's got the chops of all your crazy chopsy guys too, and amazing feel. And at the same time, when he's doing all this, he can hit hard, right? Which was a thing with his dad. Now, granted, I really don't mean that when I say that, because obviously it gets into that argument about the guys who were there first and did certain things first. And you think of all those dozens and dozens of amazing John Bonham licks that he did, that he invented, that he was one of the first drummers to be this musical drummer and doing all these things. I always say it's like sports records and breaking the 100-yard sprint record and breaking it again and all that kind of stuff, right? It's the same thing with these drummers. So I don't really mean that when I say that, but I mean, you put Jason Bonham in a Led Zeppelin 02 situation and he just nails it. He, you know, and that's the thing that, again, if I want to be argumentative about it, that performance by Jason is as good as any performance of John doing Led Zeppelin live, I think. The guy's truly one of my favorite drummers of all time. I even did a whole History in 5 Songs with Martin Popoff podcast episode just on Jason. So there you go. Love the guy to death.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan too. I think he's a terrific drummer. I really liked his brief time in UFO. I thought that might have worked out, you know, in the long run. But of course, you know, Andy came back. He was in Foreigner for a spell too, right?
Yes, that's right. I forgot that one.
Yeah. And I love his playing in Black Country Communion. But I echo Martin's sentiments that I think those BCC albums are just terrific, and I wish they would do that full time. I can't wait for the next one. But yeah, great drummer. And I've seen him do the, you know, Jason Bonham's Led Zeppelin experience or whatever it's called numerous times. And that's always fun for what it is, but yeah, cool. All right, my next guy is Pat Thrall, who most people know from the Pat Travers band, one of the most dangerous bands ever to grace the planet. Mars Cowling, Tommy Aldridge, Pat Thrall, and Pat Travers, a terrific lineup that just didn't stick around too long. But, before that, he was in a band called Automatic Man, pretty cool, kind of proggy, psychedelic, hard rock band. He played with Alphonso Johnson, bass player, again, kind of like the Tommy Bohlen thing, doing a little bit of jazz fusion. He also put together this band with Glenn Hughes. It's weird how we're talking about a lot of these same guys here, which I think had potential for big business, but because both guys were kind of a mess at the time, and I don't think the record label really pushed that album, and it was a little mellow. That could have been a really big band. It's a really great album. That really didn't do much. He has played on and off with bands like Meatloaf. All right, he's on this album here. I believe he even did some tours with Meatloaf. He was in Asia for a brief spell. He had a cup of coffee with Asia in the early 90s. He's played with Dan Aykroyd, half of the Blues Brothers. He's done some stuff with Glenn Hughes solo. He's done some stuff with Joe Satriani. He's played with Praxis, kind of all over the place. However, he's been really, really quiet in recent years. And this is like a perfect example of a guy who has all the tools. He's a terrific player. All you need to do is go listen to some of the stuff I've been talking about, but he's taken a real low profile. I think he's done some producing and directing and writing and all that sort of thing in recent years. But a guy who, I really thought would have springboarded from this band. I was shocked when this lineup didn't kind of stay together and do more. But he kind of just really became that hired gun session guy behind the scenes and stayed away from the limelight that he was starting to get with the Pat Travers group. Because I think all these other bands that he kind of hooked up with that I mentioned, for him, he may have done some touring from time to time. I think he did an Asia tour and he did a couple of Meatloaf tours. But for the most part, he was just kind of like that studio guy that appeared all over the place. Kind of almost like, not obviously as prolific, but like a Steve Lukather. But, Lukather always had his main gig in Toto and would do all these other things. Whereas Pat Thrall didn't really have that main gig, didn't do solo albums, just really just kind of kept kind of quiet, which is kind of strange. But yeah, Pat Thrall.
Yeah, I guess the closest he did come to a solo album is Hughes Thrall, right?
Yeah, and was anybody going? And again, I don't know as much about Pat Thrall's issues at the time, but we know Hughes Thrall was what, 1982, right?
Two.
Yeah, so Glenn Hughes obviously is in dire straits pretty much throughout that entire decade. So really, what were you going to get out of Glenn at that point in time? Because I know they had planned to tour, they planned another album, and it just like disintegrated. And Pat was having his own issues at the time. So a lot of promise. I think most of us at the time were pretty excited about the Hughes Thrall project, and it just kind of fizzled, sunk without a trace, unfortunately. But yeah, that would have been it for him. That would have, because both guys really kind of struggled throughout the decade. Glenn obviously wound up in Black Sabbath briefly. We know how that turned out. So I think Hughes Thrall would have been a perfect thing for the both of them, but wasn't meant to be.
Yeah. All right. Cool. All right. Let me grab my cozy pile here off of the turntable. Cozy Powell. So I'll try to go a little easy on Cozy here. I spent the whole night of the Come Taste the Band Slaves and Masters thing thinking, oh dear, I hope Butch isn't mad at me. The entire episode I was like, did I go a little hard on Tommy Bohlen? Butch seems a little quiet here. So I just Butch, I apologize. Please, I hope you don't take any of this personally. I never take any of his music stuff personally because we didn't make these damn albums, right?
Exactly.
Anyways, yeah. So anyways, sorry about that, Butch. So Cozy Powell, I've always kind of talked a little around that I'm not the massive Cozy Powell fan of all time, but there, he's been on some amazing records, and he's helped some incredible bands make some classics. Obviously he's there was Bedlam and the Jeff Beck thing, and Cozy Powell's Hammer, and but obviously his sort of huge things are things like this, Rainbow Rising, where his signature work on Stargazer, Light in the Black. Then we've got Long Live Rock and Roll, which, you know, you think of what he does on Kill the King. I've always said this, that I think his greatest drum performance of all time is this record here, especially Lost in Hollywood. Just like Simon Phillips, he really puts his stamp on a Michael Schenker Group album, the second one, the stupidly titled MSG album, right? And then there's the band there, and there's Cozy over here, right? Sadly, we lost Cozy, of course, when he was driving his Saab 900 at over 100 miles an hour on his way to meet his married girlfriend, who called in distress. And he was on the phone, and his last words were, "Oh shit!" And apparently he was catapulted through the windshield. So that was way back in 1998. But his style, you know, we've got also just a couple more here that I brought out. Yngwie Malmsteen, Facing the Animal, Black Sabbath, Tear, Forbidden. And if you want to rant out of me one day, you know, I never got what anybody finds great about Black Sabbath Headless Cross. That was kind of a hit album for them, and I really don't like it. I don't like what Cozy does on it either. He's great on here, though. He does his Cozy thing on here.
Oh, yeah.
And we've got Emerson, Lake, and Powell as well. But his style, he definitely has a distinct style, and a lot of guys want that style. And I think a little bit of why they want that style is, I mean, the great thing about him, he's a big personality. He's outspoken. So he's really in there. When he joins these bands, he really wants to be a huge part of the band. And maybe he wants to be a little more part of the band than the guys want him to be. But he's got a big sort of showman personality and style, but the showmanness of his style, you know, you always talk about the 1812 overture drum solo thing, right? And all this stuff. But the thing about his style is that he likes to have he's not a very grooving drummer, but he has that sort of aggressive, violent, hard-hitting, bashing sort of sound. And you find that there's kind of a throughput on the way he's produced even quite often. There's a very ploipy bass drum sound, sizzling cymbals. He's bashing a lot of cymbals all the time. And so he embodies certain elements of heavy metal in his drumming by being this aggressive guy that he's almost like a, you know, and I don't mean this derogatorily, but he's almost like a punk rock guy in there. He's like bringing that fire, that aggressive, that punk rock, that Ace Frehley to the band on the drums. So that's what I like about him. But yeah, he's been in a ton of different situations. But you know, sometimes I think honestly that any of my criticism of Cozy is because he's on a lot of albums that for some reason aren't produced all that well. And the drum sound isn't very good. And sometimes maybe that's kind of crossing into, so how's that, Butch? Is that better? There you go.
I like, I think for like a change of pace for him, and it's early on, I really like those two Jeff Beck Group albums he's on, which I think show a little different side to his playing. It's a little more kind of in that funky R&B kind of thing, you know, kind of jazzy. His solo albums are kind of the same way. And you ever hear that the Bedlam band he had for a short bit? He had
I forget it now. I can picture the album cover, and then he had that Over the Top and Tilt and that kind of stuff. Pointless, not great, right? You know, what do you do when you're a drummer solo album, right? You get these guys over and you write some songs and you put a few vocals on, but not on everything and blah, blah, blah. It's pretty dull, right? So
I like the stuff Gary Moore is on.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think he had a bit of a hit. He
Yeah.
had a bit of a hit. I think it was the one where he's on the motorbike going over the drum kit, the black and white photo. I think that might be Over the Top. But yeah, I just remember he was a tiny bit of a sensation at a time. So, you know, as a drummer, he was definitely a personality, right? Yeah. Brian May Band as well. Is the only time I actually saw him in person, standing outside the venue, the Danforth Music Hall. This is before I was in the business at all. I didn't approach him and talk to him or anything, but I still remember that. It's like, wow, that's friggin' Cozy Powell standing right there. Not a tall guy. He looks like a big tough guy, right? But he's not very tall.
Small. Yeah. You know what? Now that I think about it, I never got the chance to see him live. It's amazing how this guy who played with all these great bands and these great albums that I loved, and I never got the chance to see him with Sabbath. I did, you know, by the time I started going to see Whitesnake, he was already left the band. I didn't get to see him in MSG. Rainbow obviously not. Yeah, crazy. I didn't get to see it because I don't even know if he toured with Yngwie, right? I don't think he did.
I don't know.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I saw him in a small theater. Neil Murray was in that band as well. So a beautiful little theater right in my neighborhood. Brian May, Cozy Powell, Neil Murray. Can't remember who else was there, but
pretty cool. Yeah. Cozy I always thought was a good fit with Brian. I mean, they seem like they go together. Just also how I always, thought that Cozy was really good in Black Sabbath. He just has that style that I think made a lot of sense for Sabbath. So it's just a shame that Sabbath were like, nobody was bothering with them at the time, which is kind of unfortunate. But
yeah.
All right, my next kind of similar here. My next guy is Steve Vai. So Steve Vai, of course, gets his start as the ultimate hired gun in none other than Frank Zappa's band. That's basically how Steve got exposed to the world. He appeared on a ton of Frank Zappa recordings. I mean, he's on Tinseltown Rebellion. He's on You Are What You Is, Ship Arriving Too Late to Save a Drowning Witch, one of the longest album titles in rock and roll history. Man from Utopia, Them or Us, Thing Fish, and Frank Zappa Meets the Mothers of Prevention. So, and the reason he got the Zappa gig is because of his ability to transcribe, pieces of music, and Frank was all about that. And he really kind of learned how to, be a showman and how to be a songwriter in Frank's band. And, from there, he goes and releases his first solo album. But more importantly, he becomes for the next few years that guy to replace the guy. And I don't know if that's always such a good thing, but the reason he was chosen to replace basically, Eddie Van Halen in David Lee Roth's new solo project. Okay, so he's on the Eat 'Em and Smile album, and the Skyscraper comes afterwards. Great. The first Eat 'Em and Smile is a terrific album. I'm a big fan there. But again, David wanted that big virtuoso flashy guy, which Steve is. You go see Vai live, he does all these crazy things on stage, he's very active and whatnot. He replaces Yngwie in this is not the album cover, this is like a collection, but Disturbing the Peace in Alcatraz. So Graham tabs him to replace Yngwie, which is a really odd choice because he doesn't sound anything like Yngwie. So you got this kind of Swedish Gothic neoclassical young guitar player, and you replace him with this kind of jazzy, fusiony, avant-garde rock guitar player. I never even know how to describe the playing of Steve Vai because he's very unconventional. Maybe that's a little bit better way to put it. From there, he gets tabbed to replace pretty much John Sykes in Whitesnake, but more accurately, he's really replacing Adrian Vandenberg, at least for the album. But then, they take both of them out on tour, and, it's pretty apparent. I didn't get to see him on tour with Alcatraz or with David Lee Roth, but I'm a big Whitesnake fan. But I remember seeing the Slip of the Tongue tour and thinking, Vai is amazing, but this isn't a really good fit. Because I think, to me, Vai, no matter what project he's on, who he's played with Public Image briefly too, Vai is a solo guy. And I think that's what it's all about. I think he has this vision of what he wants to do with his music, where he wants to take his playing, and it's not in a band playing traditional rock riffs and posturing and all that sort of thing. That's not Steve Vai. And I've been saying for years, I love him as a player. I think he's probably one of the most talented guitarists we've ever seen. He can do anything on that guitar. The problem is, I just don't know that Steve has ever, with the exception of maybe once or twice with his solo career, he, to me, just seems like a guy that likes to throw all these musical ideas into the stew pot and say, okay, here you go, everybody. This is kind of my vision for this album. If you like it, cool. If you don't like it, that's okay. I'll go and do something else afterwards. And I think, maybe the one time in recent memory, it's not that recent anymore, when he put that little band together with Devin Townsend, I think that was an interesting direction of an actual band. But then again, you listen back on it, and the more you look at it, it's like, I don't think he really liked that all that much. I think he wants to be just the guy doing his weird stuff every so often. Every couple of years, he cranks out an album. He does these tours with these orchestras and all that kind of stuff. And that's what he's all about now. So I think all this hired gun stuff for him is in the past. Got his name out there, got him recognized, but I don't think he'll ever do that again. And I think it's a perfect example of a guy who utilized that experience and then said, okay, that was good. I made some money. I'm now a known quantity, but now I'm really going to do what I want to do. And whether people buy into it or not is another thing. We all, I think, agree he's a terrific player. What he kind of puts to album and releases is, I guess, up for debate, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I quite like the whole the Sex and Religion album as Vai, you know, and part of that is because Devin at the time was almost like a Steve Vai. They were both these crazy geniuses, you know, firing off of each other, right? And I love the Flexible album because Flexible was the most conventional, but most Zappa-esque at the same time, right?
Really Zappa-esque, yeah.
Album. And you know, that's the way I, you know, it's a bit of a denigration, but I mean, I always call his style kind of comedic, right? And it's so high up the fretboard, and it's so, you know, high notes and piercing and all that. And
all
you know,
I've said it, crazy whammy bar stuff. And I mean, even like early on, you know, when he still had the long hair, he would have these fans set up on stage, and you'd watch him live, or you'd see a live performance, and he's playing and he's doing all this stuff, and his hair is like blowing the wind. He had these earrings. I mean, it really was kind of humorous when you look at it. I don't think he took himself all that seriously, but that was the image he wanted to portray.
Exactly. And I think, you know, he's a little bit of like a Steel Panther in that guise, right? He's a little bit of a parody of a guitar soloist and a parody of a guitar hero, all decked out in all his David Lee Roth gear or whatever, or White Snake gear, right? And, you know, you're right. He's not really taking it seriously. It's the same way, you know, I used to say Frank Zappa's guitar solos remind me of a parody of a stadium rock guitar solo. It's like he's making a lot of noise and loving that it's I'm going to give you the anti-guitar solo, right? And I think Steve Vai's a little bit like that, and I've said Jay Mascis from Dinosaur Jr. can be a little bit like that as well. But Steve Vai's like that in a different way. But I totally agree. It's like this is silly doing a guitar solo, so I'm going to inject a little silliness into this guitar solo. So I don't know. All right. So my last choice, and again, mine have all been drummers, of course, is Tommy Aldridge, you know, who was on all those Black Oak, Arkansas albums. What a strange career, right? You know, he and then he kind of like came to fame in his own because he was part of the band Pete so eloquently just talked about. You know, Pat Travers' Heat in the Street. This was the lightning in a bottle version of the band with Pat Thrall, who Pete talked about. And, you know, it's funny. I'm looking at these, the quintessential way to look at Tommy is the bony, muscular, you know, bicycling, you know, fitness freak with his shirt off. And I swear, I wouldn't doubt it if all three of these pictures across 2 studio albums and a live album were all taken at the same gig, you know, practically. All right. Although this obviously isn't a gig, but he's still wearing white shorts, but I think they're different white shorts. So, but anyways, that's your look of Tommy. And, you know, big showman of a drummer, big, you know, again, swirling circular style, one of the pioneers on double bass drum, one of the pioneers in making double bass drum sound musical. Right. That's one of the cool things that he did. But yeah, my favorite things he ever did are across these Pat Travers albums, and you know, coming to a boil with the live album here, which is so funky and well put together and so groovy. And then this is a very underrated live album with just fantastic performances of all Black Sabbath classics, of course, right? But this is your Tommy and Brad Gillis version of the band, right? And Rudy Sarzo, and they all do an amazing job. This was an incredible band live, and Tommy goes crazy on these Sabbath songs, because those songs can be frames to be a little proggy and dressy and progressive, because Bill Ward was like that, and Tommy just takes that and runs with it. So he's great on this album, and he's recorded great on this album. Then of course he's in White Snake. Slip of the Tongue, which again we got, you know, that this is the Steve Vai thing, and does he fit or whatever, but Tommy does his usual Tommy thing, and then he comes back later, you know, and he's one of these hired guns that is really you get him on the phone and he's like really polite. He's the polite Southerner. He's really soft spoken. And, I think he had his partying time in the past, but that's behind him. And now he just kind of goes to work and stays away from all of that, stays away from all the drama. He's literally like the silent guy who comes in and does his job. And then he's gone kind of thing. He was on Motorhead, March or Die. But that's not a great version of what he did. He was on in Yngwie Malmsteen for a couple of things, actually maybe just a tour, but later Whitesnake, Purple album, Flesh and Blood Live, let's see, House of Lords. Thin Lizzy one, yeah, this is kind of funny. I mean, Thin Lizzy One Night Only, so he was in Thin Lizzy for a touring version of those bands, and I guess he's on just the Ted Nugent Full Bluntal Nudity live album, and maybe not on any of those studio albums around there. But again, in these things, you get to see him do a pile of classics, and you see how amazing he is at it. But yeah, my favorite stuff definitely is basically the Go For What You Know set. Funky Tommy Aldridge, that version of the band, like you say, I mean, should have stuck together. But someone I was interviewing recently who toured a bunch with Pat Travers said that band was ravaged by drugs. They were just doing so much coke and booze at that time, and that's what broke up the band, right? So
not surprising. I mean, that was the era, right? The late 70s, early 80s. Yeah. It's a shame though. Yeah, I to this day I still think that's one of the greatest lineups ever. It's talent wise, right? That should have been enormous. Should have been.
Lars Cowling on bass, who's no longer with us. He died, right?
Yep. All right. And by the way, one last thought about Tommy. So I saw Whitesnake, geez, I think the summer before the pandemic. And that guy is, I throw this term around a lot. He is a freak of nature. I mean, what he can do, what is he, 69, 70? I mean, he looks.
Yeah, he's quite old. Yeah.
He looks exactly the same as all those pictures that Martin showed, and he can still play like an absolute demon live. I mean, it's amazing. It just goes to show you that as long as you take care of yourself, doesn't matter how old you are, right? You can do the things you want to do. So he's it's impressive, and it's definitely to see him perform at this level at that age. See guys like him, like Glenn Hughes. Makes you feel okay. It's like, all right, yeah, we're all getting old, but you know what? If you really apply yourself and you really take care of yourself, you can do anything you want to do. And age is just a number, right? So very impressive.
Yep.
All right. So my last choice here for today is a British guitar player who, might be not a household name to some of you watching, but I think that he has built up an impressive resume in more recent years. And his name is Guthrie Govin, however he says his last name. I never know how to pronounce it, so I'm going to say Guthrie Govin. Try and say that fast 5 times. Another one of those guys that can probably play just about anything. I sometimes he's got like the crazy chops of a guy like Vibe, but he's really well-rounded like a Steve Morse. So he can do like gorgeous acoustic stuff. He can do like fusion stuff. He can do prog. He can do hard rock. He can do basically anything. So he's had this band for, I don't know, about 10 years or so, called the Aristocrats. And that's one of those, musicians band, right? This is a crazy power trio that can basically do everything. Instrumental music, just drop dead amazing. But he spent time in Asia, and this would be the John Payne version of Asia, kind of doing the sort of proggy pop thing. He has been playing on and off with Steven Wilson for a number of years on his solo albums. He appeared on The Raven That Refused to Sing, Hand Cannot Erase, and 4.5, so it's 3 albums. He's shown up with the band Periphery. He's played on Marco Miniman's solo stuff. He has played with Lee Ritenour, jazz guitar player. He's played with Jordan Rudess on some of his solo stuff, of course, the keyboard player with Dream Theater. He's shown up on Arion albums. He's played with Dua Bajana, who's an Indonesian jazz and jazz fusion guitar player. He's played on some Jason Becker stuff, Brian Beller albums. Of course, Brian and he worked together in the Aristocrats, and he's done tons of movie soundtracks. So he has kind of become like and again, we're talking like the last decade and a half, he's become that kind of go-to guy that everybody wants to work with, because he can plug into any style, any situation, and kind of, make it happen and do it really, really well. And he's, like I said, technically speaking, he's absolutely brilliant, but he's got the feel, he's got the compositional flair. He's got one solo album, and that's it, surprisingly, maybe because he's so busy, and that's called Erotic Cakes. And that is crazy kind of fusion-y, Zappa-esque stuff. So he's got that kind of edge to him. But to me, like every time I listen to his playing and you see clips of him on stage and stuff, he's kind of like that thinking man's musician, right? Like you can tell that he, maybe he was a math major or something when he was younger. I don't know. It just seems like everything's very meticulous with him, but he brings it forth in a very playful manner. But man, I don't know a lot of guys that have kind of come up on the scene over the last, like I said, like 10, 15 years, who to me are as brilliant as this guy. And yet he's not a household name yet, because maybe he hasn't kind of found that one vehicle to really put his kind of voice through yet. But we may yet see that. I mean, he's like I said, he's worked with some bands and artists here who I think have a bigger profile, but yet he's still not a household name. But yeah, anybody watching who doesn't know Guthrie at all, listen to any of those Aristocrats albums. I think there's like 4 of them, top-notch stuff. But he is on those recent Steven Wilson albums, and pretty impressive on there, I might say.
I'm pretty sure he's the guy that's on that long, amazing guitar solo on a Steven Wilson album that's considered one of the modern greatest guitar solos of all time. And you can go through the comments on that song in YouTube. And the funny thing about this solo is it's really long. There's got to be 2,000 or 3,000 notes in it. It's brilliant, but he hits this one wrong note, and everybody talks about it. There's just the briefest, and it's so obviously wrong. And it's just the briefest, it's in a bit of a mid-speed run of some sort, if I remember. It's the most hilarious thing. And people like fixate on it. Oh my God. It's like, this was the greatest guitar solo of all time until that one note. Yeah, it's really something to hear. And I'm pretty sure that's him. But I remember looking at that a year or two ago and playing that and going, yeah, this is truly one of the greatest guitar solos of all time. It reminded me a little bit of the way people talk about Alex Lifeson's La Villa Strangiato solo, with the long build and the composition to it and the increasing intensity. But yeah, I'm sorry, I can't remember the song. But
yeah, I wonder if it's off of The Raven That Refused to Sing, because I know there is a song.
I think it is.
Yeah,
I think it is.
It could be Luminol, or it could be The Holy Drinker. I know those are the longer songs on the album. I'll have to go with a Watchmaker. I'm going to go check into that after we get done.
Yeah, but you check the comments and people got the number like in blue, right? Okay, right here. Here's the note. And then you play it and you go, oh, and you can't get it out of your head, right? It's the pink elephant, right? You just, as soon as you hear it, it's like, that's the one thing you remember now about this song.
Well, I mean, think about it. What do you do, like, if you're a guy in the studio and, all right, so you got to play this solo, and you record a solo that is like mind-blowing for like 99.999% of the frames that bars that you're playing in, and yet there's that one note. So you're like, all right, the producer's like, all right, well, that was great except for that one note, so let's go do it again. And you do 10 other takes, and none of them match the intensity. What do? Do you just go with the one that has the tiny little mistake, but is just absolutely leagues better than the other ones? I don't know. Or you would think they would edit that out somewhat, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. You could fix it. You could literally put in the right note, but probably easier is just taking it out, maybe, and leaving a silence. You could even do that, right? So, yeah, I mean, I've heard stories of was it with John Sykes dragging him back from London to this is all in my White Snake book, which is all out of print, but I think it was what's his name from Giant? Who are those guitarists? Those song doctor dudes?
Dan Huff and
yes. So one of them, it was, they were going to call John Sykes back to play one note or like two notes or three notes or something in the solo, and it would spare, whatever the expense or whatever. And then I think they decided to bring in Dan Huff, and he just pulls in with his guitar, doesn't even have it in the case, and he just walks in and he's out of there in like 3 or 4 minutes or something. There's this hilarious story about this. Like, dudes, no, you don't got to call back John Sykes from London to LA.
Thanks, Dan. Here's your check.
Like 5 seconds worth of music, right? So it goes something like that anyways. But yeah, it's go play that. Yeah, it'll blow your mind. It is an incredible solo.
Yeah, I mean,
and I hope it's Guthrie. I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah, well, I mean, chances are it probably is him, because I don't think that Steven Wilson himself is a fine guitar player, but I think he brought Guthrie into those albums for a reason, because this guy is a serious talent. And I keep hoping, because I'm a fan. I like him a lot. I love the Aristocrats, but I hope he continues to do that, because I love instrumental music like that. But I just keep hoping that there is some project for him or some band that he joins where, he can really get noticed by the masses, because I think he's that special talent. He's got an interesting look and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what happens. I mean, he's still in his career. It's still pretty young for him when you really think about it, even though he's not like the youngest guy on the planet. But so it'll be cool to see, like, in the next 5-10 years, like how the the aura and the legend of Guthrie Govin kind of grows from here. So we'll see.
Cool.
So there you have it, everybody. Part 1 of Hired Guns. Stay tuned next Friday for part 2 as we dive into, bass players or singers or keyboard players. We haven't decided yet. Martin and I will do that as soon as we get off this particular recording here. And so stay tuned for that and a lot more. Martin, what's going on the book front? You still got Merciful Fate and Van Halen books in stock, or are they going fast?
Yes. Still have Merciful Fate. Van Halen's down to about 25. I only reprinted 100 of them. It's not at my site, but people can email me at martinp@inforamp.net, or just look me up on Facebook. We got a Contrarians new episode going up tomorrow on Motorhead, where I talk about Another Perfect Day, my favorite Motorhead album. And yeah, I've got to do another History in 5 Songs podcast over the weekend. I think I'm going to do that on post-punk. Maybe post-punk versus new wave. I love post-punk. I don't like new wave, or I might split it in 2 episodes. We'll see. But that's about it.
Cool. Sounds good. Looking forward to that. I'm waiting patiently for the Yes and Nazareth books. So I had one of our Sea of Tranquility folks here, Rand Kelly, actually got his copy in from Amazon yesterday. He was all excited. I'm like, wow, they got theirs before Martin got his. So Martin should be showing up any day now, hopefully. So we shall see. So thanks for watching, everybody. We've got more coming up on the channel here. Stay tuned for